Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, and joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennin. Late last week, Anthony got an exclusive interview with the Warren County DA, who says he's not going to pursue re-election at the end of his term in December 2025 because of his stances on marijuana prosecution. So, Anthony, what exactly did he have to say?
Yeah, so District Attorney Robert Greene has been DA in Warren County. This is his third term, but he recently announced he will not run for a fourth term, basically over his stance of marijuana. He believes it should be legalized, partially too, he sees this as a good thing of, term limits are good. You don't want someone in place indefinitely. But much of what he was concerned about in his letter is focused on Pennsylvania's prohibition of marijuana. He came out and announced that he picked up a medical marijuana card, and as a result, he had to forfeit his license to carry. Many states, with it being illegal on federal level, you cannot legally own guns on a state level, even if it's legal. So there's complications there. But he really came out as a way of really emphasizing that in Pennsylvania, there's bigger problems to solve. Marijuana prohibition does not achieve many good ends. It can be a distraction. And the bigger problem for the criminal justice system, it's not marijuana, it's hard drugs and other issues scattered throughout. And I think it's really interesting to note here, Warren County is a very rural Republican county. This is not Philadelphia, this is not Pittsburgh, but it does seem to be showing that even in some of these rural areas, the tide seems to be turning away from keeping marijuana separate, illegal, and a movement toward treating it as alcohol.
Yeah, mentioning the demographics and partisan breakdown in Warren County is interesting because in the state house, specifically the deeper red regions have long been opposed to legalization of marijuana, partially because they don't know how to enforce DUI laws and there's some cultural resistance there. So it is interesting to see this tide turning. And in fact, Greene is saying that he's not the only DA who feels this way. And in fact, he said that he agrees that hard drugs are the number one problem, and that's what a lot of them think. So to be wasting time on marijuana just seems like a lot of these top cops are getting tired of doing that. And so given that he feels this way and that hard drugs are more of a priority as far as prosecution goes, what other concerns are there about continuing to keep recreational marijuana illegal?
Yeah, as Greene said, he argued, the main reason I've stood up and taken this risk and basically put a target on myself is because 1 million marijuana medical card holders in Pennsylvania have lost their firearm rights. They also can be guilty of a DUI if they're driving. Both those things are completely wrong. And he's referencing, if you do have a marijuana medical card, you are not allowed to own a gun. You cannot have a license to carry, anything like that. The DUI law is also complicated because that can linger in someone's system for weeks. So even if they're not actually driving under the influence, if they're completely sober, if they're tested, they can be charged with a DUI. So that's also been a longstanding concern. Both those things for Republicans on Second Amendment issues, but also Democrats recently have been pushing some bills to clarify that DUI should only be charged if someone is actually impaired, not just because they have something in their system. I think something else that was interesting that Greene mentioned was, public support does seem to be behind legalization. When we look at various polls, even among Republicans, there's generally majority support. But he argued, it's not counties like Warren County that's slowing down this process. He said, I think the holdup is not rural Pennsylvania. There's a poster child for conservative Pennsylvania. Warren County is it. The overwhelming majority of people, I believe, are supporting what I'm doing. The reason for the holdup is the fact that Democrats and Republicans just can't get along and no one wants to stick their head out. It all boils down to money and politics. So he really sees, the problem is not within the general public or falling foul of public sentiment. The problem is these partisan divides, kind of this political horse trading back and forth. That really seems to be one of the things that we see stalling a number of different bills that get introduced in the General Assembly concerning marijuana.
Well, it always comes back to politics, it seems like. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennin, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.
Enjoying our podcast? Your reviews help other listeners find our show. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen.